Hi everyone, hope you're well. It's the weekend again. I really don't know where the week's gone. Time seems to be flying so fast. But okay, so for the video this week, I try and make 2 videos a month. Sometimes it's 3. If it's 4, then I'm doing well, because I've got another channel as well. So it takes a bit of time to make a video, to think about what you're going to do and stuff. But for this week, the theme stroke topic of the video is, God closes doors for a protection. It's all about, that. So, the actual title of the video is what is going to be, when God closes doors. Now, I'm sure we can all relate to this, right? I'm sure we all can, Maybe we have some plans, we're going to go to this city or that city, or we're going to start this business or that business, or we're going to start this relationship or that relationship, or we're going to take this holiday or that holiday, or we're going to go traveling here or there, or we're going to invest in this or that, or do you see what I mean? So, and then these things don't turn out the way we expect, or sometimes the door gets slammed so very obviously shut, and very often we can't understand the reasons why. Now, I've got my coffee here, by the way, I'm leaning over. So sometimes we our plans get thwarted, sometimes very suddenly. That actually happened to me about 6 months before COVID. I was actually doing quite well. I was living out in Gibraltar, British colony, British overseas territory in the bottom of Spain. Lovely place. I've been there many times. Spent 9 months there in 2015, winter 2015, and I spent a further 9 months there in total. From about sort of midsummer 2018. Basically, what happened is sorry, part of the pen just snapped there. Basically, what happened in a nutshell is I got invited over to the Christmas Works Bash in London for the company I was working for in London. I was working remotely. A lot of the kind of remote work I do or have done has been remote, which works in my favour given my location. So I came back for this Works Bash in London, and I was just there for a couple of days. A lovely event, 5-star hotel. Dinner was all paid for, drinks were all paid for, all the team there and everything. But I had a bit of a day's sightseeing in London, free time if you call it that. And then the following day I was due to fly back to Gibraltar. So I got to the airport. I actually jumped the gun there. I checked into a B&B near Gatwick Airport the night before, because the flight was quite early in the morning, and I was up at like stupid o'clock in the morning to get the shuttle bus over to the airport. So when I got there to the airport, there was absolute chaos. There was this like crazy sort of drone attack, on the airport. It was in the news, national news headlines at the time, and no flights were coming in or out, and everything was suspended. So, I took myself off for a coffee and thought about, what was going on, and, was it worth waiting around for like 12 hours? And I decided to, actually head home for Christmas. This was just before Christmas, because the Works Bash was on the 18th of December 2018. And, this, I haven't got the exact date to hand, but I believe it was like the 20th of December that it happened. I'll Google it and put it in the description. So I had to think about it, and I ended up kind of traveling 300 miles and getting home for Christmas, which wasn't the plan. I was going to spend Christmas in Spain, in Gibraltar, / La Luna. Anyway, so that, was kind of an example of God saying, this is not the path, the plan I want you to take. So obviously I went home for 10, 11 days while I could reschedule the flight, and the airport, was reopened and stuff, and I went back. Within 6 weeks, I needed to come home again, because I needed like a tooth taking out, one of the bottom back teeth or something like that, bottom middle, so that I'd come home for that, because if I had got it done in Spain, it's going to cost hundreds of pounds. And because I have like an NHS dentist in the UK, luckily I was able to get it done for free or at a very reduced rate, even though I was working all the time. So I came home for that. Then I went back out there again. This was like kind of mid-April, and everything was fine for a while. And then something else happened. Then I was like getting a bit of what we call heat exhaustion, because it was getting into the back end of May, early June, and I wasn't feeling well. Obviously, I'm quite used to the heat. I've lived in a lot of different hot countries, Greece, Spain, I've traveled to a lot of hot countries, so I'm quite used to it. But because I've been there for so long, almost 9 months, call it 8 months, given the time I was back in the UK, the temperature creeps up on you. Your body temperature starts increasing and warming up, and it kind of crept up on me by surprise, and I had to come home. But by this stage it was like the kind of third warning bell, but something was not right. God did not want me to be there. So I came home, and I had to let go of the apartment. It wasn't. I think the day after I got home, my work contract ended. This was back in, it would have been 2019, so 28th of May 2019, and so it was clearly not sustainable or not right. And in view of the fact that I had those 3 warning signs. First of all, a drone attack at the airport in December, Gatwick Airport. It's preventing me from flying back. Then I had to come back to have a tooth out in April, and then back end of May, 28th of May I think it was, I had to come home. Kind of had heat stroke for a week, and maybe a bit of kind of magnesium deficiency as well. I might have contributed to it. Obviously I didn't know at the time. So and then as soon as I got back, like the job ended like the day after, and I thought, right, enough. So God sends us these messages, and things happen for a reason. Sometimes we might be kind of thinking it's all our fault and drowning in shame, and thinking, God's punishing us for something we've done wrong, etc., etc., etc. But where the story gets really interesting is, I was back in the UK for like 6 months, and I was actually thinking, maybe this gets really interesting, I was actually thinking, or tempted, let's say, to go back out to Spain just before the Brexit withdrawal agreement, December 31st, 2020. Yeah, that's right, 2020. Because, anyone who was in Spain at that time, stayed in Spain, would have been covered by the withdrawal agreement. And then, if you kind of count forward to today, I could have got my Spanish residency, TIE, and residency, or a path leading to residency. But because I obviously I was out of work for about 6 months. I was back in the UK, and 3 months. I remember quite clearly. It was kind of Christmas Eve 2020, and I got my coffee. I sort of said to my dad in my lounge, "Cheers, Dad. I hope it's going to be a much better year." And then guess what happened? We had 3 months later, we had like COVID. So it was like these massive global lockdowns. The first one was the most strict, and there was different lockdowns that followed. I think we had 3 lockdowns in total. The first one was the most strict. So can you imagine what would have happened if I had have, stayed in Spain, got the residency rights? By the way, I don't speak Spanish. I know some words, I know some phrases, I've got some Spanish friends, but I'm not fluent. I wouldn't be able to understand a Spanish conversation. I wouldn't be able to read Spanish or write Spanish, so I'd have difficulty finding work unless it was like remote marketing work, dealing with people in the UK, customers in the UK, or maybe America or something. So can you imagine what would have happened if I was, stayed there, went back, on the 31st of, or just before the 31st of December 2020, with regard to getting my paperwork secure and everything, and then I was hit by this kind of Brexit lockdown, not Brexit, COVID lockdown, where obviously businesses were shut, not only in Spain but in the UK, and I wouldn't have been able to work, wouldn't have been able to pay rent, I wouldn't have been able to survive. So my point is, without kind of babbling on, is that sometimes God tries to protect us from things. Okay, now this is what it says here. It says that there are times when God blocks a path because it would harm you spiritually, emotionally, or physically, or even financially. We rarely see the danger in advance, but he does. And I mean, absolutely. I mean, we've just got to kind of take stock sometimes of the fact that we can't see what God can see. And it doesn't mean that because the door's closed, it's a punishment. When one door closes, like another door opens. That's certainly been my experience throughout life. And there's always a reason for these things. I mean, it could be absolutely anything from a relationship to, like a business to, you having access to a car, or, it could be absolutely, God sees the path ahead, and, he wants you to walk or have or be on a different path, So a good biblical example is like the Israelites at the Red Sea. God led them to a kind of dead end, so to speak, to protect them from the Egyptian army and to reveal his power. There's loads of examples, a couple of scriptures here. So the Lord will fight for you, you need only to be still. That's Exodus 14:14. He guards the steps of his faithful ones, 1 Samuel 2-9. You see, very often God closes doors to redirect you, or redirect us to different things. Sometimes the door, this is what it says, sometimes the closed door is God's way of saying, this is not the path I want for you, I have another direction for you. I'll put some stuff in the description rather than read it all out. Some different examples and some scriptures just to back this up. So, but God's always got a plan. God's plan is obviously greater than ours. We can, I'm sure, as I say, I'm sure we can all relate to this. Where we've had plans to embark upon something, to do something, and things have turned out differently. So I will leave it there. Thank you for listening, and I will see you on the next video.